Hey, everybody, we're going to try this again. Welcome to another episode of Relatively Damaged Live. My name is Angela, and
And
this
I'm
is
Kat.
yes,
I'm
yes,
Kat.
yes, and
All
I can
right.
hear you. Yes.
Yay.
The live shows are currently streamed Mondays on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Remember to follow or subscribe, and if you like the topic, share with your friends. On Mondays, we discuss topics that Kat and I find interesting. Today's topic is still what is God? And we'll probably jump over to what would Jesus do? But I was going to and if you can't tell, my voice is not back or to where it needs to be. I'm still having to be really gentle, but I was I was thinking about this. What is God, and if God is light and love, and maybe in all of the times that people have seen or touched or whatever, God per se, the Father, that would be the only way that they could appear to us, that God could appear in a way we might understand. I don't know that, I mean, even if I think of the burning bush, that's not no one can, the fire did not speak. I don't think there was a voice behind it, but I don't think the fire spoke, right? You see, I don't even know why I'm
I think
going into
so.
this. Yeah, because I have no knowledge, like I'm not a gospel nerd.
Well, and it all depends on which translation you read. How everybody translates it, since the originals are in different languages than what we're
Mhm.
currently speaking, and the nuances are so
Mm.
very different. And
Mhm.
we've talked about translation theory before, how difficult that is,
Mhm.
um, to get it right. And
Yeah.
with regards to that, I mean, we were getting into it last week, and unfortunately had technical difficulties, and had to uh, cut it a little short. But um, there's this idea of God is. We were starting with that idea of what we imagine God as. So if
Mhm.
God is, the punishing God, that's going to be our experience of God. And on the other hand, I mean, there are other aspects, but if God is that kind, light, loving, caring God, that's the God that we're going to experience. And I think throughout scriptures, or holy readings, in whatever tradition, you find those kinds of ideas in there, of depending on how it's interpreted, of both aspects, or multiple aspects. Um, and my concept personally has evolved over time.
Mhm.
um, it was originally that punishing God, um, and I'm guessing that was probably, it was easier to you know keep me and other children in line. uh, so it's just easy to say, well, God will punish you, kind of like, Santa won't bring you presents if you're on the naughty list, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And while that may have served as a child, it doesn't serve me as an adult,
Mhm.
because then what use do I have of God? Um, and so, upon this journey, of, in a sense, rediscovering uh, God, rediscovering Jesus, since we're in the Christian tradition, um, I've seen that loving, kind aspect, and I've experienced it. There's that whole also experiential aspect of it.
Yeah, I think Jesus was here to send that message of love. And I think that sometimes we, we miss it in the rules.
Mm-hmm.
That that we get stuck in this idea that if, and usually it's about someone else, right? If they're not following the rules, then they're not worthy. Sometimes it's about, I don't know that I'm trying to think if I've had that thought about myself, which is an interesting thought. Did I ever think that? Maybe so. Maybe that was part of what I learned, was that judgment. But it's like we have to, as Jesus said, those who would lose their life will find it, and those who would keep it will lose it. Like, just even that hanging on to every moment, that clinging to life. It's like, are we really understanding and getting what the message is out of the Gospels, out of the scriptures, any scripture? Are we fully comprehending it? And how could we look at it maybe even more metaphorically? What if a lot of this is metaphorical, and we need to look at it from a different perspective?
Well, I think that's one of the whole reasons that Jesus taught in parables. If he just gave, this is what you do, human nature would have rebelled against that. But in teaching in the way that Jesus taught, it was more, it required that thinking, it required that level of understanding. And looking into that, because that's such a profound statement. You said it a lot better than I'm going to say it right now. But whoever lose his life will save it, and whoever will save his life will lose it. It's paradoxical. It's contradictory.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of leads to the whole nature of what is life. I mean, is it just in the here and now? But let's talk about the here and now. So if you have people, no, I mean, people we know, and I've done it too, will, if only if, I miss the good old days. And instead of saying, enjoying today for what it is, they're constantly reminiscing and reliving in their mind the good old days. Times past. If only I was, in my 20s again. And that was such good times that we had. Why can't you have those good times now? Why can't you make that life worth living now? So why, in a sense, I mean, I'm willing to lose the past and to say, I'm not going to live in the past. I'm going to live today in the here and now. And that's what gives me life.
And I was thinking, as you were opening to that statement, that about even if we're living in the here and now, is it what we see? I think sometimes it's more than what we even see. And when I say that, I say with our very physical eyes. It reminds me of this one story in a book that talks about the fish. And this fish goes to find God. And I think I talked about it last week, but they don't find it. And the fish comes back and says, asks, and the wise man says something to the effect of, what's got you so down? And they're like, well, I went on this journey and I haven't found it. And he said, well, people call it many things, God, the Tao, whatever, he said, but I choose to call it water, and in that we are surrounded and living in God. That and that kind of gives this beautiful sense of safety, when I think of that if I'm breathing in and walking in God, wow.
Exactly. I mean, the whole idea of that dualism, that there is God and there is us, it makes it very difficult to to reconcile those things. And so, yes, if God is with us, there's an old Celtic, and I'm going to butcher it again, but an old Celtic kind of prayer or benediction, you know, uh, God above me, God below me, God on the side, God in the front, God in the back, God everywhere outside of me, God within me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to show that in that train of thought, or that idea of thinking in Celtic Christianity, that God is everywhere, including within us. And something that I've been kind of meditating on lately, and I'm going to bring up the quote. And this kind of fits in with the times of today, because then how do you reconcile, where is God in the Ukraine? Where's God in Russia? If you're thinking about that. And with all the suffering people in the world, where is God? People who are dealing with catastrophic illnesses and things like that. And so this is from Richard Rohr. Jesus hung in total solidarity with the pain of the world and the far too many lives on this planet that have been solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. After the cross, we know that God is not watching human pain, nor apparently always stopping human pain, as much as God is found hanging with us alongside all human pain. Jesus' ministry of healing and his death in solidarity with the crucified of history forever tell us that God is found wherever the pain is. This leaves God on both sides of every war, in sympathy with both the pain of the perpetrator and the pain of the victim, with the excluded, the tortured, the abandoned, and the oppressed since the beginning of time. I wonder if we even like that. There are no games of moral superiority left for us now. Yet, this is exactly the kind of lover and the universal love that humanity needs. And thinking about that, especially as the season of Lent with, you know, Christ's crucifixion and all that kind of stuff, is, why? Why? And maybe it was to show that solidarity with us. I understand you because I've lived it.
Well, right. And I think when speaking about war and things like that, there are injuries on every side of that. There are injuries all the way over here in the United States. Pain and suffering from watching and seeing what's happening. And I think that in some ways we forget that. I mean, I don't know. A friend of mine has this idea that I think I understand it to be like God is, we are one being, and we're like 7 billion different eyes looking at this one being, and this one being just wants to play and wants to, and is curious, what happens if, let's try this, let's try that. And out of sheer love, of figuring it out in the process. And I think that's really interesting because it lends to a different perspective of, oh, okay, we just need to know what this is like. What is it like to be in war? What is it like to have this happening? But I mean, then there's no blame. There's no you're wrong. Are the perpetrators deserving of love? Well, I've never known a perpetrator who hasn't needed love in order to find their peace, to feel safe enough to find their peace and to even investigate that. So, I think unless one has really gone on the forgiveness journey, then that would actually seem really foreign to
Mhm.
them, because again, it goes back to this very human idea. If we don't set these rules out so that people stay in line, then they'll never figure it out, which really comes from a whole lack of trust that says, I know you can find the way. I know that when you repent, that you're really going deeper into this larger mind and making changes for the better. And that, I trust you to investigate and to question. It just is a whole different place to come from that I think is really a beautiful place to come from. But the general public, I don't think would understand that.
And I think that goes to the idea is that people think that we're all separate. They don't see the interconnectedness. Um they don't choose to look at things in love. It's not to say that they don't feel love or loving. It's that I think by moving in that direction, you, at least for me, if I move in that direction of embodying love, of saying I have the light of Christ within me and I'm going to be that light, it enables me to act in a different way, that even though I may not like a particular person or something like that, I can still love them and
Like,
be
see,
loving to them, and show that love and feel that love for strangers and feel their pain
mm-hmm.
when they're in pain and they're hurting. And knowing I can't necessarily take that onto myself, but just be there.
Yeah, it's because we do live in this dual world. And even in my comments, I don't know that other people would get it, is what I said, right? That's very dualistic, thinking that they don't know, when I think at the depth of their being, they do know.
Well, we all have that within us. It's
Mm-hmm.
whether or not we choose to, I think, in a sense, let go of our own ego.
Mm,
If it's about me, 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 I'm not really. God is there.
yeah.
I'm not really seeing God. I'm not connecting with God, that higher consciousness, and with others,
Mm-hmm.
except in a transactional way.
Right, right. I remember someone saying to me last week about the Pharisees and how they were stuck in the rules. And I'm just thinking of today's world and how we get, I'm going back to the rules, and I know I'm shifting this a little bit, but we get stuck. I mean, Jesus didn't spend time with um, at the temple as much as he spent time with the people that were ostracized and told they weren't good enough for the temple. And so I think about that today, and like, how many places in this world do we say you're not worthy because you don't fit the guidelines? And I think that's really painful. I think, where would Jesus be? He would be with all those people. Every single one that didn't fit the guidelines. Every single one that didn't fall within the rules. And lovingly leading them back, it reminds me of the 2-year-old who falls and scrapes their knees. you know Perhaps it's not even their fault that they fell, right? They didn't know any better. They were confused. What was the trauma they grew up in? And as we walk over to the 2-year-old, are we yelling at them? Oh, you need to walk. I can't believe it, you're not walking. That very angry, like, and judgmental perspective. Instead, we walk over, brush off the knee, give a hug. You can do this. You can do this. I believe in you. And in some ways, they've been able to show that emotion, our heart is magnetic, and that emotion can be sensed far from the body. So we even exude that belief. You can do this, and we put it out in that field. And these kids, they pick up on that. And there is a difference between believing in the people that are around us and trusting that they know the way and that they can find that quote unquote light, and not, I think.
Yeah. The idea of the punishing God so the child falls down. You must have done something. You teased your sister. You didn't listen to me because I'm the adult, or whatever. And the loving God says yes, picks, as you said, picks you up, brushes off your knee, puts a Band-Aid on it, gives you a hug. You can do it. Get up and try it again.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be okay. I'm here. And
it's safe.
Right.
Yeah.
And, so all the trauma of living with, you can't, you're not good enough, you're stupid, you're unworthy, you'll never be anything, it adds up.
Mm-hmm.
And we go out into this world as adults, and those are the stories that we tell ourselves.
Mm-hmm. It's not surprising then that we would need to die to who that is, right? That part of us kind of has to die off.
Right. And it's not, people think of that as literal physical death.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more that physical death to that part of the ego that is telling you, no, I can't. No, I'm not worthy. No, you're stupid.
Well, and even when we think about the ego, when I think about the ego, if I go at it as that part of me needs to die,
I'm gonna kill it.
yeah. when I shift from that to loving that part of me that wants that to behave that way, right? Then again, I'm shifting back into that love. It's just, so it's very paradoxical, right? That part dies, but I can't kill it, and yet loving it helps me.
Yes. And it's that whole idea of the dying is again, it's not killing it. I'm trying to think of a metaphor and it's not coming to me. I'm usually pretty good with those.
You are.
But all right, like a flower, okay? So you have a flower, you have this beautiful apple tree in your yard, and the apple tree has these beautiful flowers. Well, those flowers have to die in order for the fruit to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if the flower is that fleeting, thing that's going on, whatever, it's beautiful. It might even smell good.
Yeah.
But it ultimately is going to be putrid and die. And you have to be willing to let that go and say, well, wait a minute. You know what? Yeah, this flower is beautiful and it's great or whatever. Or it could not be, but you let it die and something beautiful will grow from it.
I love your metaphor and I want to build on it.
Go ahead.
Think about this. Even from the seed must die to bring forth what's next. And then as that plant grows into a tree, there are many seasons of things dying to create more. And finally we get to the flower, and then we get to the fruit. And yet then in some ways the fruit dies as we eat it. If you want to go there, right? and that's just really beautiful if you think about it, because that allows us as humans to grow and change, because parts of us are always shifting and changing. And perhaps maybe that part wasn't so wrong, because if it didn't exist, we wouldn't be where we are now.
Right. And then to go back to what we were initially saying, if for the person who's holding on to that past, get a negative past, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, or those days were so wonderful, I wish I was there, not living in the present, it's still not a dying kind of thing.
So almost like they're insisting on staying as the seed or as the flower, wherever it is they are in their journey.
Yes. And not willing to go to the progression of things. I always remember this, and it happens, I think, more with women than with men. Oh, yes, I'm 29 for the 17th time. Seriously?
My sister told me what that is. I can't remember, but it is a problem, believe it or not.
Yeah. And I'm like, whatever season of life you're in, it's where you're at. I can't go back and live yesterday.
Well, and I can't go forward and live tomorrow either. So
Right.
maybe I am looking and waiting for that fruit, but I'm looking at that fruit going, but it needs to be here now. And I'm sorry, that's not what's here now. Wouldn't it be great if it was? But it's not the season for that.
And so, so to take this metaphor and to expand it, you look at the prayer of our Father, and you and I have looked at it, I know, in different translations, but I'm just going to go with the more or less standard translation.
Okay.
And the part, give us this day our daily bread.
Right. And in the version I like, I think it's, hold on, I'll tell you what it is right now. Grant what we need each day in bread and insight.
Yes, and I really like that. I'm glad you had that at your fingertips to bring up, because yes, it's obviously for the sustenance of the body, but the insight for today, the fruit I need today, the fruit I need to eat, the fruit I need for the nourishment of my mind, of my soul, of my heart. My insight, as it says. And in that, we can live in that one day.
Because, I mean, all we have is right now, and now, and now, and now. And yes, I'm making a point. So it's this eternity of what's happening now. That, oh wow, that's really beautiful. Like, it's so funny when we're talking and something comes and I'm like, oh, now I understand. Now, not just this now, but as it shifts and changes, that's eternity. Like, all that ever exists is right this moment. I think I'm understanding that on a deeper level, but I'm not sure I'm articulating it very well.
These are things that philosophers and theologians have discussed for centuries. So I don't think in a short half-hour conversation we're going to get it.
We're not.
But that's okay.
Well, and I think too, even the philosophers and theologians that have studied it for centuries got where they needed to get to for their process. Because I don't think, even if I find an answer for myself, that the answer for Kat or for anyone in my life would be the same answer. Perhaps each theologian was true and correct for them.
And I think that's why, even though we're coming from a Christian tradition in our experience, I think that's why when we read other writings from other traditions, there is a connection to there. There is truth in those writings because the truth is universal and it's shown throughout that, whether it be Hindu spirituality, the Tao, Buddhism, although I know that's not a belief in God necessarily, but
Yeah, neither's the Tao, right?
right.
The Tao is
Islam, all the various different Christianities. You can, argue theology all you want, but those deeper truths, I think, are there.
Yeah, I love it when I see a universal truth because for me it resonates. Or in some cases, sometimes it feels like a reverberation, like, oh, like there's another one. Oh, I hadn't and it's just so beautiful. So I know our time is up, but did you have any last? You look like you have a last.
I do. I have to bring it up on my phone. So this is a quote from Rumi, and I think this is kind of fitting for our discussion. Become nothing. Love will turn you into everything.
Oh, what a great ending. Become nothing. Love will turn you into everything. And then there's spoken of in different other places of emptiness. So it's almost like by emptying. Wow. Okay. I really love that quote. However, our time is over. So we're going to leave you all on a cliffhanger. There's also a Relatively Damaged podcast where I interview guests who've overcome some sort of struggle in their lives and how they found health and healing. Yep, there went my voice again. Sorry about that. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and many more. I'm Angela, and this is
Kat.
And we'll see you next week. Bye.